There is a moment that happens to every thinking person, usually around 2 in the morning, when they realize something terrible. The crowd was never listening. Not really. Not to the argument. Not to the evidence. Not even to you. They were listening to themselves, using your sentences as a mirror, and feeding back whatever flattered the shape they already believed in. Arthur Schopenhauer knew this before psychology had a name for it. He spent a lifetime watching men argue, watching them vote, watching them clap, and he came to a conclusion so cold it still makes people uncomfortable today. Most opinions are not conclusions. They are costumes. People do not think their way to a belief. They are born into one, frightened into one, flattered into one, and then they spend the rest of their lives defending the costume as if it were their own skin. Schopenhauer did not say this to be cruel. He said it because he had read Machiavelli on power, watched the German aristocracy posture through 2 revolutions, and concluded that the human mind, left to the crowd, does not seek truth. It seeks comfort. It seeks belonging. It seeks the dopamine of being right in front of other people. And once you see this, really see it, you cannot unsee it. You start noticing it in boardrooms, in family dinners, in the comment section of every video you will ever post. So tonight we are not going to comfort you. We are going to dismantle, piece by piece, the idea that the public has anything resembling a mind of its own. And we are going to show you exactly how Schopenhauer built the case. 200 years before social media made it undeniable. Stay until the end, because the last reversal is not about other people. It is about you. Part 1. The Man Who Hated Crowds. Picture Berlin, early 1800s. A young philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer watches Hegel fill lecture halls with admiring students. Students who do not understand a word of what Hegel is saying, but who nod anyway, because everyone else is nodding. Schopenhauer schedules his own lectures at the same time as Hegel's. Almost nobody comes. He is furious, not because he wanted the crowd's love. He despised the crowd, but because the experiment proved his thesis before he had even finished writing it. The crowd does not follow truth. The crowd follows the loudest costume in the room. He would spend the rest of his life writing about this, in essays with names like On Authorship, The Art of Controversy, On Thinking for Oneself. And underneath all of them sat one brutal idea. An opinion held by a majority of people proves nothing except that it is easy to hold. Difficulty is the filter. Truth is usually inconvenient, often unpopular, and almost always boring compared to the story people would rather believe. So when an idea spreads fast and wide, Schopenhauer's first instinct was suspicion, not respect. Ask yourself, when was the last time you changed your mind because 1,000 strangers agreed with each other online? And when was the last time you changed your mind because one person, alone, showed you a piece of evidence you couldn't explain away? That gap is the entire argument. Part 2. The first reversal. Opinion is inherited, not earned. Here is where Schopenhauer turns the knife. He observed that the overwhelming majority of human beliefs are not arrived at. They are absorbed, the way a child absorbs a language, without ever choosing it. You did not select your politics through 40 years of careful study. You absorbed them from a household, a region, a decade, a wound. Then, later, your mind went looking for reasons to justify what it already felt, and called that process thinking. Psychologists would later give this a clinical name, motivated reasoning. The mind does not start from evidence and walk toward conclusion. It starts from conclusion, usually planted by family, tribe, or trauma, and walks backward, collecting evidence, like a lawyer building a defense for a client it has already decided to acquit. Schopenhauer saw this 2 centuries before fMRI scanners proved it. He called it the difference between a man who has thoughts and a man who merely has opinions handed to him, the way one inherits furniture. And here is the part that should unsettle you. The inherited opinion always feels exactly as true, exactly as obvious. exactly as just common sense, as a genuinely earned one. There is no internal alarm that goes off to warn you the belief in your head was never yours to begin with. Reversal 1. The confidence of an opinion tells you nothing about its origin. The loudest convictions in any room are usually the least examined, because examination was never required to acquire them. Part 3. The second reversal. Most people cannot think, only react. Schopenhauer drew a brutal distinction between two kinds of minds. The first kind absorbs information and reacts to it instantly. Pleasure, anger, agreement, disgust, the way a dog reacts to a sound. He called these the men of head, without depth, quick, certain, and utterly incapable of holding two contradictory facts in their mind long enough to actually weigh them. The second kind is rare. It can sit, uncomfortable, inside contradiction. It can say, "I don't know yet," without feeling humiliated by the sentence. It treats a half-formed thought as something to refine, not something to defend to the death in a group chat. Almost nobody operates in the second mode by default. It has to be trained, and Schopenhauer, ever the elitist, doubted most people ever would be. You can test this yourself, and it is uncomfortable. Next time someone states an opinion with total certainty, ask them one quiet question. What would change your mind? Watch what happens. The trained mind will actually pause and answer. The untrained mind, the vast majority, will get irritated, because the question exposes something they never wanted exposed, that their certainty was never built to survive contact with a counterexample. It was built to survive contact with other people who already agreed with them. This is why Schopenhauer believed debate, as practiced by most people, is not a search for truth. It is theater for the self, a performance of having a mind, staged for an audience that is performing right back. Reversal 2. Reaction is not thought. The speed of someone's certainty is often inversely related to the depth behind it, because real thinking takes time the ego is not willing to spend. Part 4. The third reversal. The crowd punishes originality, not error. Now we arrive at something genuinely dark, and Schopenhauer knew it from bitter personal experience. He watched, across his lifetime, brilliant ideas get buried, not because they were wrong, but because they arrived too early, in front of an audience not ready to be embarrassed by them. He watched mediocre ideas triumph for decades, simply because they confirmed what everyone in the room already wanted to believe about themselves. This is not unique to philosophy. Historians have long noted how Galileo's trial was never really about astronomy. It was about an institution defending its authority against a man who made it look foolish in public. The threat was never the math. The threat was the humiliation. Crowds do not ask, "Is this true?" First, they ask, almost unconsciously, "Does this make me look stupid for having believed otherwise?" And if the answer is yes, the crowd will reject the truth and call it heresy, or arrogance, or not how we do things here, and feel righteous doing it. Schopenhauer's most famous, most quoted line captures the whole arc with surgical precision, that every truth a person dares to speak passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, and finally, long after it could have changed anything sooner, it is accepted as something that was obvious all along. Notice what never appears anywhere in that sequence: evaluation. At no point does the crowd sit down and weigh the idea on its merits. It simply waits until enough time has passed that agreeing no longer costs anything socially. Reversal 3. The crowd is not a jury. It is a thermostat. It does not measure truth. It measures social temperature and adjusts its opinion only once the temperature has already changed. Part 5. The fourth reversal. Vanity disguised as principle. This is the reversal that made Schopenhauer enemies for life, because it does not spare anyone, least of all the educated. He observed that the more a person's identity is wrapped around a belief, the less that belief can ever be examined honestly, because to question it no longer feels like updating information. It feels like an attack on the self. Watch closely how people defend opinions in public, and you will notice the tell almost every time. It is rarely, "Here is evidence that contradicts you." It is, "How dare you?" or its quieter cousins. The eye roll, the change of subject, the sudden coldness in the room. That is not the sound of a mind defending logic. That is the sound of an ego defending territory. Niccolo Machiavelli understood a darker cousin of this same mechanism in The Prince, that men will forgive you for attacking their reasoning far sooner than for attacking their vote. Reputation, because reputation, not truth, is what keeps them fed, employed, and safe inside the tribe. So the smart operator in any room learns quickly. Never directly humiliate the belief. Humiliate it, and you've made an enemy for life, even if you were right. Schopenhauer's insight cuts the other direction, toward the listener rather than the operator. Most public opinion is not a conclusion about the world. It is a defense of status inside a tribe. Which means when you hear someone state an opinion with maximum confidence and zero curiosity, you are not hearing their thinking. You are hearing their insurance policy. Reversal 4. An opinion defended with anger is rarely a belief about the world. It is a belief about the self, wearing the world's clothes. Part 6. The fifth reversal. Knowledge without judgment is just furniture. Schopenhauer drew one more distinction, and it is perhaps the cruelest of all, because it applies to the very people who feel most exempt from this entire video. The well-read, the credentialed, the well-informed. He separated knowledge from judgment, the way a jeweler separates the stone from the setting. Knowledge is information. You can stack 1,000 facts in a man's head, the way you stack books on a shelf. Dates, statistics, the names of philosophers, and he can recite every one of them on command. That man, Schopenhauer warned, can still be utterly incapable of an original thought, because facts arranged by someone else are not the same as a conclusion reached by you. Judgment is what happens when a mind takes raw material and does something with it nobody handed to them, sees a connection no one pointed out, doubts a consensus everyone else accepted on faith. This is why some of the most informed people in any room, the ones who can quote statistics for 45 minutes, are often the easiest to manipulate. Their knowledge was never digested. It was memorized for the purpose of being repeated, not weighed. Feed them a confident-sounding statistic from a source that flatters their existing tribe, and they will defend it as fiercely as if they had derived it themselves from first principles, because to them, repetition feels indistinguishable from understanding. Otto von Bismarck, a man who built an empire largely by exploiting exactly this gap, is reported to have remarked that people believe what is repeated, not what is proven, and built entire press strategies around flooding public discourse with confident repetition rather than rigorous argument, betting correctly that very few citizens would ever check the difference. Reversal 5. Information is not insight. A head full of facts arranged by other people is not a mind. It is a very well-organized filing cabinet, waiting for someone with actual judgment to come and use it. Part 7. Why this matters more now than it did in Schopenhauer's century. Schopenhauer died in 1860. He never saw a smartphone, never saw an algorithm, never saw a notification light up at 2 in the 2 morning promising him that 40,000 strangers agreed with the thought he just had. If he found the opinions of his own century shallow and inherited, what would he make of ours, where the volume of agreement has been engineered, by design, to feel like proof? Modern psychology has only sharpened his suspicion. Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiments in the 1950s placed a single honest participant in a room full of actors, instructed to give an obviously wrong answer to a simple visual test. A striking number of honest participants caved, not because their eyes deceived them, but because disagreeing with the room felt more costly than being wrong. Now multiply that room by millions, and let it run 24 hours a day, and you have something close to the information environment you are sitting inside right now. The crowd has not gotten smarter since Schopenhauer's century. It has simply gotten louder, faster, and far better at disguising repetition as proof. Part 8. The sixth reversal. The only vote that matters is the one you cast alone. So if the crowd is unreliable, if status, ego, repetition, and inherited belief contaminate almost every opinion you will ever hear in public, what is the alternative? Schopenhauer's answer was not cynicism, it was solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. The discipline of sitting with a question long enough, alone, that you can tell the difference between what you actually believe and what you were simply handed by the room you grew up in. He believed, and this is the line that should follow you out of this video, that a man who thinks for himself acquires a conviction, while a man who merely reads or listens merely acquires an opinion. The first is alive. It can grow, adapt, correct itself when new evidence arrives. The second is dead on arrival, borrowed furniture, rearranged but never truly owned. The test is brutally simple. For any belief you hold right now, political, religious, professional, personal, ask yourself one question, slowly, without flinching. If I had been born in a different family, a different country, a different decade, would I still believe this? If the honest answer is no, you are not holding a conviction. You are wearing a costume the room handed you at birth and calling the fit personality. Reversal 6. The opinion that survives being alone with itself, stripped of applause, stripped of tribe, stripped of inheritance, is the only opinion that was ever really yours. Closing, the question you cannot unask. So here is where this leaves you. Schopenhauer did not write any of this to make you feel superior to the crowd. That would simply be another costume, the smug certainty of the man who thinks he has escaped the trap by learning its name. He wrote it as a warning aimed inward, because the most dangerous moment in this entire video was not when you nodded along to a reversal about other people's shallow opinions. It was the moment, somewhere in the middle, when you felt a flicker of discomfort and didn't. Ask yourself, which of your own convictions might be furniture you never chose? Go back through your own mind tonight. Not your politics, not your tribe's politics. Yours, alone, in a room with no audience. Ask which beliefs would survive being orphaned from every person who ever applauded you for holding them. Most won't. And that is not an insult. Schopenhauer would say, it is simply the human condition. Faced honestly, for perhaps the first time. The crowd was never going to give you the truth. It was never built to. It was built to give you belonging, and mistake it, every single time, for thought. If this unsettled you the way it should, you already know what to do next.